Hello viewers and welcome to a new episode of Trashtalk on Flying Circus, Chariot of Steel Edition, a series that's all about discussing the good and very bad of the many tanks and tank-like vehicles you can find in the Chariot of Steel expansion for Flying Circus. In today's episode, Markgraf Wächter and VM94 Panzerstampfer. Let's start with the Wächter. Year introduced, 1600, served with, Kingdom of Sopwith, engine, Sam Courier L, strengths, ahead of its time, weaknesses, good luck finding one. Sopwith's treaty with Fokker and Gotha forbade them from pursuing tank development and required them to turn over all existing tanks to the victorious powers, but tank production stopped for a few months at most. Eliminir production continues to this day in small numbers, but they were briefly joined in 1600 by the hastily renamed Watchman. Officially a mobile sentry station, the Wächter is the most sophisticated tank in the world, armed with a heavy cannon in a rotating turret, propelled by a V-12, and with a 5-man crew. The vehicle represents a perfect balance of firepower, mobility, and armor. If people were still designing tanks, they would probably look a lot like this. Very few Wächters exist, and most are accounted for. The 1601 Sopwith Expeditionary Force under General Dietrich was rumored to have a half dozen of the first production vehicles, but it is unlikely any of them have survived to the modern day. They were abandoned wherever they broke down, left to the mercies of the civilian population. If one could be restored, the owner would be in possession of one of the best tanks in the post-war world. Based on the Vickers Medium Mark II, which is an interwar era tank, which already said much about how powerful it will be, the last line in the Wächter's history is not a hyperbole. The Wächter is, bar none, the best tank in the entire book, period. It is fast, can maneuver over and around terrain well, has a good armor profile of 421 with 25 integrity, meaning even if a field cannon can get through the armor, it can survive it. Its engine is very reliable, plenty of fuel, and it's expensive, but well worth its price. It has space for a crew of 5, with internal engine access so it can be turned on and off without getting out of the tank, wireless set to radio other units, also comes with crew intercom so the crew can talk with each other without yelling over the running engine, festooned with so many hatches that crew can exit and fire their personal weapons in every direction, which also translates to a lot of potential spots for mounted guns. Speaking of guns, it has 3, a frontal light machine gun, and a turret with a field cannon and a coaxial water-cooled machine gun. This alone makes the Wächter the best tank in the game, let alone everything else I have mentioned and more that I will talk about. Having a turret that can turn in every direction is simply the best thing ever, and having a coaxial WMG means that the turret gunner can fire the field cannon and the machine gun at once, and that is also good for ranging a stationary target like field gun for the gunner to finish off with the cannon. And it gets so much worse for your enemy, because like its real actual inspiration instead of its historical inspiration, the Wächter has the gyro-stabilized trait, reducing the movement penalty on firing on the move by 2 and allow the use of gunsight on the move. This stacks with can't miss, meaning the Wächter can move all the time, dodging bullets, and just never get any accuracy penalty ever. Combine its traits, its armor, its guns, and its mobility together, and you got one hell of a powerful tank that can defeat practically anything in its way, which is very funny, because by the time the Vickers Medium Mark II actually took action in India and Egypt, it's basically obsolete. The only reason it could be more powerful than anything made in World War I was because it was simply made with the knowledge and technology gained from and past the war, but like many interwar tanks, it was just a stepping stone, an attempt to figure out what the next war really demands. Unfortunately, or fortunately in a way, the Wächter has another problem: you will be outnumbered most of the time, because this tank has a very unique trait called Hero Tank. Multiple player characters are meant to drive this thing around together, and not as a separated squadron. This is both a good thing and a bad thing, as multiple PC in the same tank would turn the tank into even more of a machine of death and destruction. On the other hand, one lucky hit might be all it takes to spiral things out of control. Fortunately, if you can call it that. Again, the Wächter also has the mechanic's dream trait, making it very cheap to repair the tank, and on field, patch fix is far easier to succeed too. So how do you defeat this tank if it's in your way? Well, first thing first, your GM is a very cruel person. Second, the Wächter is still, ultimately, a tank, with all the weakness and strength of one. Its side and rear armor are still very weak, and while it has adequate anti-infantry capability, infantry squad is still going to be quite a danger to it, as it does have far less machine guns compared to other heavy tanks, even if it can use them more effectively. But, more than likely, you will never encounter this thing because it is stupidly rare, and any GM deploying the Wächter has to realize that this means you just gave your player a chance to salvage one of the best tank in the entire game. If the GM wants to still deploy this thing and not give the player a chance to salvage it and also be even more sadistic than usual, a shade Wächter is one way to do it. Just be aware that the players are legally bound to tackle you onto the ground for it. The Markgraf Wächter has no modification, it's too rare for it. Now, let's move on to the Panzerstampfer. Year introduced, 1594, served with, Macchi Republics, engine, Meyer Baranjunge, strengths, king of the hill, weaknesses, sinks in mud. Above the great mountains, walking vehicles have been an engineering speciality for generations. This industry emerged initially from the tradition of fine watchmaking in Loring, and the corresponding industry of equally complex but much larger clock towers. This provided the groundwork for a variety of clockwork novelties, evolving through the 1500s into practical walking vehicles which could navigate steep hills and rocky ground better than any wheel. This technology was adopted by the Macchi Republics and found many military applications, including a variety of unarmored utility vehicles, ambulances, and gun carriers. Macchi's armored walkers were in development simultaneously with Gotha's tracked assault vehicles, and the VM-94 was accelerated into service after the Wandleberg's debut, arriving just 3 months later. Though officially the Viandante di Metallo, Iron Wanderer in Macchi, it was derisively referred to as the FA-94, for Ferraglia Ambulant, walking scrap metal. Later, their mostly Gothic-speaking troops adopted the nickname given by their enemies, the Armored Stomper. Though expensive and temperamental, the Panzerstampfer could scale just about any terrain, climb slopes up to 60 degrees, and was nearly unstoppable. So, this is something entirely different than the usual, that's for sure, partially based on the Saint Charmant, which is something. I will talk more details on it next time. The Panzerstampfer is what if the Saint Charmant is both less stupid and more insane. The Panzerstampfer is very slow, but has very impressive torque until it walks on soft terrain like mud, but still has a very impressive handling thanks to its fully rotating chassis like that of whatever the hell this is. It has armor profile of 332, good but not against big gun, but it looks like this for a reason, and has 36 integrity, which is more than enough to not be on fire in one shot from most things. Its reliability is okay, might need a fuel truck or two, and while the vehicle is decent for its price, you will be spending quite a bit on its upkeep. Those legs are quite complicated to maintain. So let's just talk about those legs first, because the Panzerstampfer has 3 different traits that are all related to legs. First is turret hull. The entire hull can basically turn independently from the legs, allowing the vehicle to move freely in any direction no matter which side the hull is actually facing. This also grants it gyro-stabilized trait from the Wächter, which with speed 2, means that it effectively doesn't suffer accuracy penalty while firing on the move, and also doesn't take tank battle penalty for single arc weapons. What this means is simple: despite having a frontal mounted field cannon, an LMG limited to 3 direction, forward, left, and right, it doesn't matter because you can just turn the whole damn hull like a turret. Add in the lack of single arc weapon penalty and its handling, and the Panzerstampfer can really outturn most things in tank battle. The only bad thing I can say is that being the driver of the Panzerstampfer must be disorientating as hell. Second, standing tall. The Panzerstampfer is just tall. This thankfully doesn't make it easier to hit because there's far bigger things around, but it does make enemy melee attack with actual hammer or explosive be only capable of stunning the crew or immobilizing the leg, because that's all they could target, unless they did immobilize the leg, in which case you are in trouble. However, infantry cannot take cover behind the vehicle when it is moving, because those legs don't look like they are providing solid cover at all, and if the vehicle got burnt out, a roll of 11 to 19 is partial, because getting out of a vehicle this damn tall off the ground is gonna be hard. And third, high ground pressure. On solid ground like rocky terrain, the Panzerstampfer can climb over practically anything like a mountain goat. It is literally designed for it, but going on snow or mud is going to be a problem for it. Worse still is when planning for a route, you can't use the Panzerstampfer to clear a path to make it easier for other vehicle to move through, because this thing has legs and most vehicle don't. In short, the Panzerstampfer is very good at moving through obstacle on its own, but in terms of strategic movement with non-walker or even just over bad terrain, it's terrible at it. The Panzerstampfer also has 2 more traits. Mountain tank means that it has reinforced lower glacis, which in turn means that when being above your target, you count as being hull down, or hull up, and get +1 armor to your frontal armor, meaning that 3 just became a 4 and now you can take a field cannon head on, and with such a high torque, it will be easy for the Panzerstampfer to find a high ground and shoot someone through their weak top armor. Also, the underside of the tank use its side armor value instead. This makes the Panzerstampfer one of the few tanks capable of taking an anti-tank mine and feeling nothing. Finally, there's artillery tank. The field cannon of Panzerstampfer is long enough that one can use it as a light howitzer to bombard target indirectly from afar. This might be the point where the GM will throw the carrying capacity rule at you so you don't just sit down and fire the gun behind a hill until it's gone. It is very useful though. In fact, the Panzerstampfer is kinda just designed around long-range attack, as the field cannon also comes with binocular sight, letting your shots be accurate even at long ranges. Other than that, 3 LMG might not be enough as infantry deterrent, but the Panzerstampfer is quite well armored in any direction so it should be fine, and with 6 crew needed to run this thing well, the Panzerstampfer is somewhat on the expensive side with its upkeep, though considering how good this tank is, it's worth it. In short, just climb somewhere high and shoot until you are dry. On second note, I also want to say that the Panzerstampfer is a way better design than this goddamn thing. I hate it so much. It would be cool as an alternative history design thing, but it's the goddamn future and the Sherman already fucking exists. It's not even vertical. How can you call this thing a vertical tank, when it's not even vertical? I want Steel Battalion on PC so badly. As for how you deal with this tank, it is kinda tricky, since the Panzerstampfer can effectively fire while moving backward, is well protected against anti-tank mine, and can climb over just about any obstacle, so trying to block it is meaningless. It simply will not stop. But if you have a field cannon or anything with AP4 and the Panzerstampfer is not at a high ground above you, that tank will turn into a burnt out hull very quickly. The Panzerstampfer has no variant because all its traits took too much space to write in, and that's basically it on these two tanks, the highly advanced Markgraf Wächter that shows why it is the future, and the stomping VM94 Panzerstampfer that takes high ground like nothing else. Anyway, that's all for now, and I will see you all next time. Hello there, if you like this video, please subscribe and click that notification bell button. If you want to see the videos early as well as further support my channel, you can join in my Patreon page, or buy me some coffee, links in the description. Anyway, have a nice day.